Well, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world and when you're listening to this, if you're listening to it on demand. Thank you for joining us to talk about the attack flow. I think this is a very interesting tool and capability that has emerged recently, relatively recently, and it's a very powerful one. And so it's something that we wanted to talk about here today. I'm going to have each one of our panelists actually introduce themselves and give a short bio. So Heath, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Michael. So I work for JP Chase within our cyber intelligence group, and I lead a team called Applied Cyber Threat Research. Our main objective is to take our company's threat intelligence and visualize that, and then look for ways to focus on the weaknesses to strengthen our firm's posture.
Great. Thank you, Heath. Sunil.
Thanks, Michael. Hello, everyone. My name is Sunil Sundar. I work for the MITRE Corporation in the Center for Threat Informed Defense. The Center for Threat Informed Defense is where MITRE partners with private sector companies and not-for-profits, private sector companies like JP Chase and Fortinet, not-for-profits like CTA, to identify important, relevant problems that the operational cybersecurity community has identified and work collaboratively to create a solution. We do this under the auspices of threat-informed defense, which is using a deep understanding of adversary tradecraft to orchestrate our defensive operations. Thanks for being here to talk about attack flow.
Great. Thanks, Sunil. And Douglas.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Doug Santos. I'm with Fortinet, and I'm the Director of Advanced Threat Intelligence. And in this role, I'm responsible for threat intelligence gathering, reporting, hunting, emulation. And I lead our threat intelligence innovation business unit, where we collaborate with MITRE CTA to identify areas of friction when it comes to operationalizing threat intelligence defense, and work with MITRE to build those projects and open source them. Yeah. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, well, thanks everyone for being here. I'm Michael Daniel. I'm the president and CEO of the Cyber Threat Alliance. We're a nonprofit threat intelligence sharing organization with about 36 members from around the world. And so we think a lot about like how do you actually share threat intelligence in a meaningful fashion, whether that's in an automated fashion, whether that's finished intelligence, whether that's human conversations, however you can share that information, how do you share it and share it well? But I think I want to set the foundation for, this conversation. So let's actually start with, a lot of people have probably heard of ATT&CK. If you're watching this, webinar, you've probably heard of ATT&CK. But let's start with what actually is ATT&CK and why do we need it? And maybe Sunil, we'll start with you since MITRE helped develop it, but then we'll also turn to Heath and Douglas for how they actually use ATT&CK.
Thank you, Michael. What is ATT&CK? One of my favorite topics, and I hope one of yours as well. So ATT&CK is a globally accessible knowledge base of adversary tactics and techniques developed by MITRE. What distinguishes ATT&CK, I observe, is that everything in ATT&CK is based on real-world observations of adversary operations. So if it's in that framework, be it enterprise, mobile, ICS, it is something that an adversary has done to achieve the adversary's objective, and defenders like yourselves have identified them. Now, what ATT&CK has become is a common language for the cybersecurity community to describe adversary behavior. And if we've done this well, Douglas and Heath will tell you great reasons why this common language has helped them and helped the world.
Great. So Heath or Douglas, whichever one of you wants to go first.
I'll start.
Yeah, sure.
I think to chime in, one, with the MITRE Center for Threat Informed Defense, prime example of why ATT&CK is successful is there are a slew of companies and nonprofits that are members of CTA, including ourselves at Fortinet, we talked about. And it's incredibly difficult in an environment where ATT&CK doesn't exist for us to partner and discuss the threat actors and what they're doing, how their attacks unfold, what they're doing, in your environment if you don't have a common taxonomy that everyone can relate to. So for starters, just the fact that companies can work amongst each other, companies like Cyber Threat Alliance, where you're partnering to share that intelligence. Michael may have certain verbiage he uses, and Fortinet may have an entirely different language they use. So ATT&CK has been great for us in that there's an ability to share the intelligence. And also inside the firm ourselves here, we have several different groups where depending on what the products are you're supporting, you may see a difference in language as well. So being able to have a common taxonomy that we can use internally and that we can also then take externally without any additional overhead uh, to relate that out is extremely beneficial.
Yeah. To Kit's point, it does provide a lot of consistency. So it's a shared vocabulary between all stakeholders, be it the red teaming, blue teaming, SOC analysts, or higher level executives. And by providing this consistency, this consistent language, it helps with communication, right? So it's easier to explain threats to technical and non-technical stakeholders. And also because it's a common language and you start mapping threats to it, you can use it to drive your SecOps processes, right? Because ATT&CK did solve a lot of problems when it comes to threat hunting. So we moved from hunting down hashes in network IOCs to actually hunting for indicators of behaviors, right? So it allows us to move a step up in the pyramid of pain and be more effective when hunting threats, doing detection engineering, so on and so forth. So many things. It's hard to pin down to just the specific ones, but yeah.
Yeah, and I think, it sounds like, I mean, we talk about it, right? That it enables you to have this common language, but that's way more important than people realize, because particularly as you try to use tools to correlate on data, one of the things that CTA does is we collect technical threat intelligence from all of our members and enable our members to um, download that threat intelligence that's been shared by the other members. And if they don't have a common language for it, it becomes very difficult to parse through all of those different all that different technical threat intelligence, and you spend your time wondering if, like, when they use the word reconnaissance, what does that mean to them, right? Or are they, do they use some other word that you've got to come up with the synonym for, right? And that makes it much more challenging. So having that common language is really important. To just enabling organizations to share information about what the bad guys are doing. But of course, that's not. So that was the state of affairs for a long time. MITRE, attack's been around; it's been widely adopted. But one of the things that is also true, right, is that I've forgotten how many techniques there are now in attacks, Anil, but it's a bunch, right? I mean, a couple of hundred or something like that, and there's multiple frameworks. But no bad guy uses every single technique every single time that they're doing something, right? They use a subset of those techniques, and more to the point, they can't use them in an infinite number of ways. Some techniques have to, as a matter of logic, as a matter of physics and math, some of those techniques have to come before other techniques, right? So there's any bad guy set of activity is going to trace a path. They're going to go through a sequence of the techniques, some subset of them, and actually understanding how the bad guys flow through and use those techniques in what order, and maybe there's branching trees, but there's an order to it. And that is also really important to understanding where you have the opportunities to thwart the bad guys. And if we can better understand those paths or flows, then I think it gives us a great advantage as defenders. And so that's kind of the next step, is then how do you actually map out what the bad guys are doing in order? And then, because that's a lot easier to do if you're doing this visually rather than doing it with a bunch of words, that's where you start to get into attack flow. And so now we'll actually go to the next question that I wanted to raise, Sunil, which is what is ATT&CK Flow and what does that do for us?
Michael, I like your description of attack as a common vocabulary, and conversely, what adversaries do as a sequence. So once we have a common vocabulary, we need to know how to converse, as it were. Attack is perhaps the dictionary of adversary actions, but how do we turn that into a conversation? The Center for Threat Informed Defense created ATT&CK Flow as a visual language to describe how adversaries combine and sequence offensive techniques to achieve their goals. So what I would like us to get out of this panel with all of you is that at the conclusion of our discussion, you are inspired to go to this website, ctid.io/flow. This includes all the resources that we've created under the umbrella of ATT&CK Flow, under this visual language to describe how adversaries sequence offensive techniques. So when we go back to looking at how attack is used, we can take a threat report, and one example that we use is an incident that occurred in the last decade of Tesla's cloud systems exploited by hackers to mine cryptocurrency. We got this in an open source threat report, and then, like many of you do, mapped it to the MITRE attack techniques, the ones that the adversary used. Now, to look at this, one would think that the defender needs to track individual or atomic adversary actions in order to stop the adversary. It is much more effective, though, to track the sequence of behaviors the adversaries employ. With ATT&CK Flow, we can look at that intelligence report, the techniques, and identify the order in which the adversary moved through to achieve their objective. In doing so, you can find what techniques are dependent on previous techniques, what techniques are peripheral to achieving that goal. And by prioritizing the techniques that are required in the adversary's attack, which you can see through the ATT&CK Flow, you can then stop the adversary before they reach their objective. ATT&CK Flow can take in any sequence of attack techniques and create a flow using what we've called as ATT&CK Flow building. I'll throw this up one more time, ctid.io/flow. Bookmark it now, and please visit all of these resources after we talk.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important to think about the bad guy activities as flows, right? Because I've long said that if you try to think about being a cyber defender and your goal is to prevent the adversary from getting access to your network, if you use that as your metric, you're going to fail eventually, because the bad guy gets an almost infinite number of attempts and is probably going to succeed. However, if you think of it as what Sunil just said, which is you are actually trying to prevent the bad guy from achieving their objective. Now, yes, if you can keep them out of your network, that's great. But if you stop them anywhere short of achieving their objective, you win as the defender. And that gives you a lot more bites at the apple and totally changes the nature of the game, if you will. It totally changes the nature of cyber defense. So, I mean, Heath, Douglas, I want to turn to you and think about how do you think about ATT&CK Flow, and what does it do for you sort of internally?
You can go, Doug.
Okay, so one of the things that really stand out in ATT&CK Flow and its usage within Fortinet is when you're trying to communicate threats to executives, right? So because they're not in the trenches and they're not seeing threats every day, it's really hard for them to mentally visualize threats as we're explaining today. So you can begin to explain a threat to an executive and saying, hey, so this threat, it was a 0-day attack. It exploited a VPN concentrator's vulnerability. And then after that, after it got a hold in the shell, it basically tried to escalate privileges so it could persist in the kernel. And then after that, it would move laterally using brute force on SSH credentials. And once it got into another box, it tried to do some process injection. When you got to that, the first part was already lost. It's gone, right? So
you almost lost me, and I do this for like a living.
That's why it was a good example.
Yeah.
So communication to executives and general public, to that matter, it's one of the most important things here because it allows us to communicate consistently the threat from the from the SOC analysts all the way to the higher executives, right? Another thing is once you start curating a lot of attack flows, you end up with because attack flow allows you to, once you are constructing the flow, to define for each box, which generally is a technique, to tag an asset to that technique. So, this is mainly our database server. These are our VPN concentrators. This is our this database contains confidential information. This one contains customer data. So once you start mapping a lot of flows, you get a sense of which assets are being attacked the most. And that can drive security, the budgets of security. So we need to have the security tooling that goes deeper so we can detect those threats, or we need to invest on people that has these skills. And once you have a lot of those attack flows as well, you can start to see which techniques are used heavily across intrusions and which one of those are invariant behaviors, meaning attackers need to go to through that technique to continuously to execute the attack. So it allows to do threat hunting, detection engineering with more laser sharp focus. That's one of the most important things for me. Yeah.
Doug read off my Word doc for my answers, but first and foremost, obviously the ability to relay out the attack in a visual, as Doug said. And Sunil, look, I think that screenshot probably doesn't go into the detail which Attack Flow Builder 3.0 that recently came out does. They've done some changes to it with the background and night and dark mode, a blog mode, which really helps a lot when you're trying to just take a screenshot to show out to leadership. But we use it several different ways internally. Doug, one that you had mentioned was the ability to see a string of techniques in a row. And that helps our detection engineering teams start to try and identify where maybe you get more bang for buck for a SOC alert, for example. Red team, purple teaming, obviously, in terms of planning out and kind of using it as a journaling tool as they're going through their month or 2 month long hunt. It's better than putting down on a Word doc to place down what you find, where you find it, and how you got there. What we, in my team, applied cyber threat research team, use this a lot for is when the intelligence comes in and we are visualizing that, there is a level of scrutiny that goes into this with seeing where our controls fit in. And we ask ourselves the question, if this attack happened to us, would we have been vulnerable? If the answer is yes in some sort, then the question is, where are the weak points that we can then overlay more controls? As you had seen on the previous screen, I like to say these attacks are not just a linear fashion, right? It's like a tree trunk that goes in the ground and the roots branch out everywhere. So some of those things you see may be going on concurrently. So where you think, like I said earlier, the most bang for the buck might be, may not be the best place to put a new control, or may not be the best place for an alert. So being able to step back and see the gravity of how the entire attack unfolds is really helpful. And as Doug said, there's a lot of different nodes that you can use just in addition to the tactics and techniques you're putting down in terms of if you're doing a red teaming, purple teaming, or if it's a really good in-depth intelligence report where you know the types of systems targeted and you're doing that against your environment. You can see the assets. You can talk about the PII data that's sitting in those environments. If you're doing a red team hunt and you find clear text passwords or something like that, you can indicate those things along there. So we are all in on attack flow. You've actually brought the code in network. So I think that's something else worth bringing up on how companies can use it. It's all open source. So you can bring in network and you can build on top of it and tap into databases that your firm has to bring in additional data sets aligned with those tactics and techniques as well. And that's a huge value add for us. So now I'll call out one more thing that anyone's wondering. It's worth noting that that website you go to when you launch Attack Flow Builder, it's all on your machine on your local browser. So none of that's ever sent out, which I think is also important as security experts to know that whatever you're building there, if you're plotting out how someone attacked your network, you're not sending it to MITRE on some public network. It just stays on your machine within your web browser, and you close that session, it's gone, which is important to know.
Yeah, no, I think all of those examples that you just gave are, it shows the tremendous power of this tool, right, of this capability. And I think about Douglas, I think about my times back when I was in government and I was trying to explain to senior policy officials like what actually happened during an incident. And boy, I would have loved to, just thinking about the OPM incident alone, like thinking about having, if I had had this kind of capability to map it out and show it, that would have made my life so much easier, like trying to just explain what happened and then being able to talk about, okay, so what can we do about it so that it doesn't happen again the same way, right? I think it just really shows the capabilities there. And I think fundamentally it's a visualization tool, which is also really important. And we've talked a little bit about that, but I wondered if we want to draw out, like Heath, from your perspective, what's important about the fact that like it's not just a screen of Python code, right? Which I mean it could be in some ways, right? But it's fundamentally a visualization tool.
The impact on a visual is a no-brainer, right? Showing leadership, going to red team to purple team to prove out a concept of an attack flow that we built out based off of someone else that hacked goes a long way. From an incident management standpoint, if you're looking through a process that has unfolded, there's a timeline view. So as you're going through and you're building out your attack flow, you can kick that out into the attack flow visualizer and you get this beautiful visualizer that says this happened, then this happened in a timestamp. So when you're going back briefing leadership, if you show them that attack flow visual and they're still having a hard time grasping with just tell me what happened when you called me at midnight, you can pull up that timeline view and it kind of gives you a more detailed perspective. But going back to the other point, when you can look at the attack flow and you can see how many different directions a threat actor went, and Michael, as you said, taking more bites of the apple, and you can see how many places you stopped them ahead of time, it kind of helps you to get a good measurement of how your defense is performing overall, especially when you start to look at layered defenses. When you want to know if you have strength in defenses, you have preventative, detective, and reactive, right? You're able to start looking at those from that holistic approach as you're looking through how things unwind to see, do I have something along the way that builds out each one of those to build out that more robust security posture? And then being able to say that to leadership or to the other teams, this is how well we fared and this is why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's a saying that goes that defenders think in lists, attacker thinks in graphs, and attack flow basically levels out the playing field. So obviously humans process visual information faster. So a diagram is way easier to understand than a page of text. And I can, so it's a new standard and security tooling needs to evolve to adapt this standard. But I can only envision a future where attack flow is fully deployed in a SOAR and I have information from the firewall about a specific malicious payload being detected, trying to be downloaded by an endpoint, and then you have an EDR installed on the net and that endpoint collecting attack flow as well, sending to the SOAR, and then MDR as well, collecting attack flow and sending to the SOAR, and SOAR kind of reconstructing the attack from the telemetry from different parts of the network. And I mean, it would be a beautiful world, eh?
To that point, right? Attack flow builder, you can import and export in sticks format. Yeah. So a lot of AI tools, you allow the ability to kind of take in, like you said, those systems of record, all those data sets. You can help it do some of that heavy lifting if you're trying to just dredge through tons of threat intelligence. That's like a nice value add that came out in 3.0 as well.
Yeah, so that was actually going to be my next question, which is sort of like, how can attack flow help with information sharing, right? Like fundamentally, we use attack here at CTA. Like in fact, when our members send us indicators of compromise, they must associate it with a MITRE, at least one of the top level categories of a MITRE attack framework. That's one of our requirements. But how does attack flow actually help with threat intelligence sharing?
Let me take a
So
first crack at this, please, Paul. So, what I'm grateful that the community has done with things like MITRE ATT&CK and STIX is we've formalized our language and we've made it machine-to-machine shareable. That said, that's not enough. For the advanced attacker, for the persistent attacker, we're going to need the analysis from folks like Heath, Doug, and you all that are listening to us. What attack flow does is it uses those same tools that gave us machine-to-machine sharing and allows us to put it into a format that is human-to-human analytic processing, human understanding. I got to double click on something Heath pointed out that his team is doing of using attack flow as a journal or a sketchbook to work through their analytic process. I'm really impressed. That's a powerful use case for this and to sharpen our skills as analysts.
Yeah.
I think, Michael, attack flow builder, how can help with information sharing? Cyber Threat Alliance is a prime example, right? Where you're having multiple companies come together. I kind of mentioned earlier, sometimes it's difficult with intelligence you're collecting to get that out. But when you're laying on an attack flow and it's normalized, it's easy to give it to Doug and to you and to share it out. And I mean, it's really us as a collective versus the threat actors. So being able to give something out to everyone that you've observed so that everyone has that betterment and can go back to their networks and try and make sure they have a defense against it is strong when you look at it from that standpoint. I think that's the big thing for me.
Yeah, I mean, for us, a big part of it is making sure that the threat communication is effective because you can put out blogs and you could put out reports, but making sure that that information sticks, it's a big issue for us. So the ability for us to embed an attack flow on a blog post to basically explain in human language, right? How a new ransomware campaign unfolds, how a new specific malicious payload is doing their techniques, which techniques are dependent on others. It's a very big part of the attack flow usage here as well for external communication. So we try to put it on blogs and reports, and it's a big part of what we do here with attack flow.
Yeah, and I think from my perspective, I think the kind of the next level up, right? We've been talking about sort of attack flow and sort of mapping out a particular, a particular incident or a particular set of activities. But now, like you also start to think about like, you get multiples of these, right? And so you start to be able to think about comparing different flows across, your experience, but also like, what does Fortinet see, Douglas, across multiple customers, right? And now I start thinking about using this tool and this capability to do analysis on multiple attack flows, right? And sort of combining that data in some new ways. And Sunil, maybe I can turn to you for how is MITRE sort of CTID starting to think about kind of like macro analysis, if you will, of attack flow?
We do see, and we've heard from users of attack flow, that this analysis of a collection of flows to identify common choke points for an adversary, or common choke points for a particular asset, is very valuable. I'm grateful to say that use of attack flow came from the operational community. It's in our roadmap to build that out because the projects that we take on in our center, our collaborative R&D, are responsive to the needs of the community. We're grateful that you see this potential for choke point analysis, for looking at attack flows as more than individual documentation of attacks, rather as almost a graph database that we can identify multiplicity. And yes, let's build that in. So that's on our roadmap, Michael.
Yeah. Douglas.
Yeah. So attack flow got me thinking because it was because of attack flow and the huge corpus that it's getting. Um, it's getting a lot of corpus because most defenders are starting to use it. So you're getting more attack flows, and because you got more attack flows, you can build new projects like technique inference engine, right? So, and then you can say, okay, so if I see this specific technique in my environment, what is the next most likely technique which I should be hunting for to see if adversaries are actually moving in your environment? So it was just for me, it was just a very clear example how defenses evolve and one standard leads to another project and we can start building on top of previous work. It was really eye-opening.
Yeah, that's a really sort of interesting kind of way to think about it of like, okay, we've seen, you
Mhm.
know, we've seen this technique, this technique, this technique, and then, what are the probabilities of the next move, right? And it's, you almost start thinking of it like decision trees, right? Like
Yes,
it's 80% of the probabilities on this fork
exactly.
and 20% of the probabilities over here. I'm sure it's more complex than that, but it's like,
You nailed it.
yeah. And that really starts to help you, focus. And 0%, by the way, is back over here, right?
Yes.
Because so we don't need to waste any time over there. And so that I think is a really powerful tool. I
Mhm.
mean, Heath, how could you imagine sort of, using multiple attack flows, sort of combined?
So we are looking at that internally. I've actually brought that up to Sunil in the past. The comparative analysis piece is huge. Uh, Being able to look at a threat actor you're tracking, see the 3 or 4 attacks they're doing, or a series of threat actors you're tracking, a series of attacks they're doing, and trying to find the commonalities so
Mhm.
you could start to build the defensive posture around that is big, right? Because SOC, those teams are always burdened with a lot of alerts, for example, and investigating those and triaging those. I think one of the keys we're looking to do is build better controls that are a better value add for the teams. And that means putting them in the right places and not just firing an alert on everything all the time.
Mhm.
So, from a defense posture improvement point, being able to, for example, lay out 3 attack paths and see that there is a common choke point for all of those lets you say, aha, that's one spot to put it instead of focusing on each one singularly and building out a new control for each. So that's been huge for us. And attack flow creates a new problem. It's a good problem in that you have this new data set to look through because now you have a new way to look at everything. And now it's what do we do with all this data? How can we improve our posture now?
Yeah, I live that problem, right?
Mhm.
As a threat sharing organization, we're always sort of dealing with that. But to me, there's also this opportunity too to, um, I think, start to also do even higher level correlations, right? Like I start thinking about like, can we make you know, one of the things I think about for CTA is like, could we make a repository of what our members identify as different attack flows and start to do some analysis on that, right? Of, you know, do different types of bad guys tend to use certain types of attack flows? And does that mean that if you're in your sector, Heath, in the financial sector, you are more likely to encounter these? As opposed to if you're in the healthcare sector, you're more likely to encounter these types of attack flows, right? And how does that help you, right? So that we take it up to even a next level of you know analysis to give even more advantages to what the defenders to the defenders, so that it makes their jobs even easier. Um, I think as we start to come, towards the end of the webinar here, what I really want to do is sort of just go even further than what I was just saying, and talk about sort of where can this capability go next? what's on the horizon? What would you like to see? So maybe I'll start with Douglas, and then we'll kind of close it out with Sunil and let him talk about what they're working on. But Douglas, how would you like to see sort of, attack flow evolve, and where do you see it going?
I think I standard as it is, and the tooling is quite mature right now. I would like to see more vendors actually adopting that and bringing the capability into their products. So once you have attack flow mapping on different technologies and security toolings on your environment, then you can bring it out on SOAR, right? So imagine you being able to visualize the attack as it is unfolding, because SOAR is reconstructing the attack from multiple sources. So you can have like a live defense visualization and kind of like a checkboard uh, design of the attack. I mean, more. I would like to see more, even within MITRE, right? So Caldera doesn't actually support attack flow mapping as well. So it would be good to have more realistic attack scenarios, to have attack flow support within Caldera, because then you can realistically pinpoint that if this technique fails, then the others are not going to execute, and then the attack stops in there, because today Caldera just run through all the techniques. So more integration within the MITRE ecosystem as well. And one thing that I think that MITRE is doing, and there's a new project for that as well, is that we're doing more training and education, because as an attack flow user myself, we tend to be self-educated. So most of the time we're reading through guides and through the documentation, and we're trying to spin the Docker ourselves. But having MITRE actually driving workshops like the one I attended in Singapore was invaluable. My knowledge of how to apply and how to get insight from peers on how they're using is just so much more valuable. So it was a great use of my time. So this is how I expect attack to continue to evolve. Yeah.
Great. That's excellent examples, Douglas. So Heath?
I think the education piece is huge. A few years ago, I completed my master's, for example, in cyber intelligence. There's almost no mention of attack in that program. And thinking back, generally, when I talk to new graduates coming out in these fields, they're learning about the attack framework as they get into the field, like Douglas said. Something you learn as you go. And that's kind of mind-boggling to me when you have something as robust as this system. We're going on version 18 here at the end of October, that getting that out there more. Maybe that's MITRE's problem to solve, but we as a community, we have this common language that we can band together behind. That's beneficial. From attack flows perspective, I would love to see it built into more tools. Most of the tools that we're looking at that do this type of thing, extracting TTPs and helping you identify all this stuff, none of them have a visualizer. So why not use something the industry uses that's free? It's for the common good. It's posted on that website, like Sunil showed, would be great. I know from me internally, I would love to see the ability to store those attack flows centrally, which I know is a challenge, and Sunil may have been going too far here, but the corporate edition for Attack Flow Builder, where you can then do that analysis, right? We're creating all these awesome flows, but then we're all left for our own accords to store those and look at. But that is a wealth of data when you start to look at trends over time and you're tracking certain threat actors. And so the ability to store those and then do more data analysis on that, the comparative analysis piece, the extrapolation on that, if you want to use a piece of AI on that, to try and say crunch through some of these big numbers and pick out some trends for me, which was kind of on the technique inference engine, Doug, that you mentioned earlier. That's what I'd like to see. Like this, like I said, it's creating a new problem for us, all these attack flows, but as a result, like we're sitting on a gold mine of data that could help you try to do some predictive analysis. That's huge.
Yeah, and I think what's really important about that too, right, is when I think about, what we do, we've already had mentioned that pyramid of pain, right? And what's interesting to me is because we're dealing with humans in terms of the malicious actors and other things on the other end, while it is relatively easy to switch IP addresses or to refactor your infrastructure or to refactor your code or do this or that, it's a lot harder to actually change your organizational process, right? And so these kinds of things, blocking this on the figuring out where to block the attackers, where they have choke points and things like that, that will cause them a lot more disruption than what we're able to do now. And so I think from my perspective, this really has when you combine this with some of the AI tools that we're looking at, we really have, I really believe we're on the cusp of being able to fundamentally change some of the aspects of the offense defense balance in certain areas. And that's really exciting to me. But Sunil, let me turn to you to sort of talk about where you see attack flow going and what could be coming down the road.
Thanks, Michael. Grateful for Doug and Heath's comments because I see the future of attack flow in three ways. There's what vendors do, there's what users do, and there's what MITRE does. Doug and Heath already brought up the request that vendors adopt attack flow and make it compatible with their tooling so that when Heath's team is using attack flow for their analysis, the tools that Heath's team has brought in are applying attack flow, and it reduces that friction in compatibility of tools. Second, and I think this is a shared responsibility, that something MITRE can do is develop attack flow in a way that Doug or Heath or any of you can apply your internal tools to the flows you create. One step of that is, as Heath said, letting you build your own repository of flows. And that's something we can pursue, but you have powerful tools that you've adopted because they meet your needs. So how do we, MITRE, let you apply those tools to the flows? So that's the second. Third is, what can MITRE do? This is a little more into our roadmap for the future of flow. One thing that is a priority for us is to integrate attack flow with the technique inference engine. With attack flow, you can write down and visualize the techniques that you've observed or you've read in the threat report. But what about other likely techniques? It's technique inference engine that's built on a large language model that can let you infer what other techniques might have been seen. I think that will expand attack flow from the known knowns into the unknowns. Second is the application of controls. The center has developed quite a few projects on mapping the effectiveness of security controls in native technologies and frameworks to the adversary behaviors they defend against. Well, when you develop a flow and you have your graph of adversary actions, we have the data to overlay the graph of your countermeasures. So it tells that full story of what they did and what you have against it. That's another integration that we can build with our tools. The last thing that MITRE can do is take requests. So as users of attack flow, by going to our website, you're going to identify other use cases. The way that you can learn about attack flow is seeing some of the example flows that we've created. Another way is to look at some of the usage guides for a cyber threat intelligence analyst or a red teamer on how attack flow will help you. Finally, Doug and Heath brought up training. The training that we've developed on attack flow is available, linked from our attack flow website. So we want you to use this. I personally want attack flow to become as ubiquitous as a Venn diagram. It is what everyone uses. It is what everyone understands. That's my vision. And to achieve that, we're going to help you learn how to use it and help you stop the adversaries.
Excellent. Well, that's a great, way, I think, to bring this discussion to a close. I really appreciate you all taking the time, Sunil, Heath, Douglas, to chat with me today about where this is going. I think this is a really amazing capability. I will say I've been at this so long that there weren't things like masters in cyber threat intelligence, Heath. So we're all sort of if you're of my ilk, then you are all self-taught because there weren't any training programs. So So it's really exciting to see where all of this capability is going to take us and what we can do. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for your time today, and I will really look forward to seeing where Attack Flow goes and how CTA and other organizations like us can continue to use these tools. So, thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.